So I look to a guy and go, "What's that?" And he goes, "Marshall." And just all of a sudden, bah! Eddie's playing, which was 10 times louder than what the white noise was that was here. I had the guys from Def Leppard come and sit at my table. First feature film I worked on was Star Trek VI, actually, Undiscovered Country.
Oh, wow.
And I got really worried. I thought I could lose my house.
Welcome to the Murders to Music podcast. I'm Aaron, your host. We have an amazing show for you tonight and an amazing guest. So tonight, we're going to connect all these dots. The Grinch with Jim Carrey, opening for Guns N' Roses, working with Van Halen, growing up in Los Angeles, and much, much more. Tonight, you guys are going to meet Mr. Michael Key. Mr. Michael Key is a guitar player. He lives in the Vancouver area. He's a guitar player in Double Down, the band that I'm involved with, and he's an amazing, amazing man. We're going to talk about all the highs and lows. We're going to talk about what life was like in Hollywood growing up, what it was like working on movie sets. But before I give away the rest of his thunder, I'm going to bring him on the show. So why don't you guys welcome in with me, Mr. Michael Key. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Michael Key. So one of those guys that every time you say his name, I have to say his first and his last name. And I'm going to turn towards Michael while I talk to him. You guys get a side view of my head. But so I'll tell a little story about meeting Michael. So I moved to the Pacific Northwest in 2010. And about 2015, I started attending a church. Cheers. Started attending a church here in the Vancouver area. And the first night I went to play drums, there was this guy on stage, and he looked like Hollywood. And he had a scarf on, and he had necklaces, and he had rings on, and watches. And I'm like, who is this dude? So he plays guitar, and he played it really, really well. And he was wearing a scarf. And that's what I remember about the first time I met him. And he went into my phone that night, and he was talking about some whiskey that he wanted or some lavender-flavored something that he wanted. And it was hard to find, and I was going to Seattle the next week, so I wanted him to like me, so I offered to pick it up for him, but that never panned out. Anyway, so he went into my phone as Michael Guitar Scarf. That's how I knew him. So now it's been a few years, almost a decade, and we're still together. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Dude, I'm honored to come and do this with you. I'm glad you're doing a podcast thing. It's cool that it's great to see the number of episodes that you have now. You know, I'll tell you one thing about podcasts.
Yeah.
I never used to listen to podcasts. I remember Tyler Clarensaw, who's a guy that we both know, he's a worship leader at our church. And and he asked me one time, he says, "You listen to podcasts?" And I go, "No, not really." It's funny because I listen to podcasts every day, several. The other one is he asked me if I had Spotify, and I thought that was actually part of the menstrual cycle. So I didn't know what that was. And so he schooled me on, there's this thing called Spotify that you can listen to music on. So in the early days, this is before your time, actually, the early days of Clarence, he would give us the worship sets on Spotify.
Really?
And now it's all Clarence's fault because I'm a Spotify guy and I listen to podcasts every day. So I'm honored to be on yours, man.
Well, thank you, dude. Hey, I'm just trying to get this noise gate off, so give me 2 seconds here.
Is that what's going on with my mic?
Yeah, I hear it.
Yeah.
And it's cutting you out, so I want to just open this up.
I thought it was me.
No, it's the noise gate. So thank you so much. So you've watched some of my episodes, and the way that I go through my stuff is I just want to talk about, my transition from where I was to where I am now and the things that have influenced me along the way. But the more I've got to know you over the last decade, I can't believe it's been that long. The more I've got to know you over almost the last decade, I know a little bit about your history, but very little. Even just before talking tonight, before the show, when we were talking, I learned more about you than I've ever known in the past. So I want to explore some of that stuff. I want to talk a little bit about Hollywood and what that's all about and why I call you Hollywood and the scarf and just the image that you have. And I think once the listeners understand what your history is, it'll all make sense. Is that cool?
Yeah, that's fine. It is interesting about the whole Hollywood thing. When I came north, actually, let me back that up. When I was in LA, I was just another guy because everybody, a lot of people work in the movies. I was a Burbank kid. So you either worked in aerospace or you worked in entertainment. So it's like half the town, or at least a third of the town, works on film, television, radio, something. It's just not that special. But I come up here and I've become like the token Hollywood guy,
Yeah.
which is really an interesting thing. When it's all of a sudden that's special now or something, or it's unusual. So yeah, it's just as part of the deal. But no, I'm happy to. I figured this was going to be a really different type of interview and whatnot, and it makes it easy because I've known you a long time, so I'm really comfortable with you.
Have you been interviewed before for things like this?
Oh, I've been interviewed so many times, but it's really nothing like this kind of podcast and what we're doing. I feel like it's different. I think it's more in depth. It's more going deeper. It's going behind the curtain a bit. Yeah, you're hearing that gate, aren't you? I'm hearing it.
Typically, I like it, but tonight I want it to go away.
Yeah, go away, you evil gate.
Away, you evil gate.
Evil gate. We don't want you anymore.
No gates for you.
But I figured, there would be things I could talk about that I don't normally do. And like you said, it's not uncommon what you just said. You said that you've known me a long time, and then us just talking a little bit, it's like, oh, I had no idea. And I've gotten that a number of times when I get to know somebody and we're going deeper than surface stuff. And then they start finding out my story and they're going, you got to be kidding.
Yeah. Well, let's start with your story. Tell me about growing up. So if I understand correctly, you were born in Los Angeles. You had a kind of a troublesome first few years. Your parents, tell me that story. Let's get into that a little bit.
Yeah, they told me I was born in LA. I don't remember much about it, so I guess it's kind of hearsay.
Yeah.
But I guess it was General Hospital in Los Angeles, and I lived there the first 4 years of my life. And
at the hospital?
Almost. It actually might have been better if I was still there. My mother was 17 when I was born, barely 17, and my dad was 21, about ready to turn 22. So kids having kids. And their marriage was already falling apart. And I think they stayed together long enough for me to be born. I think they felt some obligation. It's like, okay, we got this baby. So they tried to make an extra effort. But I don't remember any of that because my mom and dad split up before I can remember. And my dad was wild, young, and not fit to be a parent. And neither was my mom. She was a child.
Yeah.
So my grandparents stepped in, as grandparents sometimes do that. They'll bridge the gap, and they were doing it. So they were raising me, and that wasn't great either because their marriage was really tumultuous. I saw my grandmother and grandfather, and they weren't young at the time. I saw them physically fight.
Wow.
I saw my grandmother going after my grandfather with a butcher knife, and him using a chair to keep distance between them, and me hiding underneath the dining room table because I'm a kid. So this is my world. This is infrastructure. These are the people that are supposed to be the adults and the stability. And, what do you do?
And how old were you at this time?
I don't know. I want to say it's before my 4th birthday. So it's one of those earliest childhood memories is my
Sure.
Not that everything was traumatic. I had fun time with the cats and fun time. When my grandfather would come home, he's kind of like, they were like really like from a role standpoint, like my mom and dad in a way. They were filling that gap. My grandma was there all day, and there's no kids. There were kids. There were some kids that were across the fence in another house, but I was told those were bad kids, so I'm not supposed to play with them. So thanks a lot. The only kids around there, so I have nobody to interact with except for the cats and my grandmother. So I got the only child thing big time. And TV, there's my big pacifier. I was a TV kid. So when my grandfather, who was an iron worker, when he would come home, it's like Dad's getting home. That was a big exciting thing. So they were really in that type of roles of my life. But as you can tell, their relationship was screwball, and they end up splitting up.
So was your mom and your dad still involved in your life during this time, or had they moved on and done something else? Where are they at during this whole period?
Okay, Mom, I have one like very, very fuzzy memory of her being at my 4th birthday party, and I can't even see her face. She's just kind of there. I don't have much memory of it. And from that point forward, I didn't see her again until I was 30.
Wow. What about Dad?
Dad was a ruffian, young guy out there drinking and fighting and not prepared to really be a parent in any way of any kind. So he was, he would come show up sometimes. It was like, oh, cool, this is my dad, and he's only 22 years older than me. So we're a lot closer in age than me with my son.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was cool. But, he only came around sometimes. And so I didn't have much relationship with him, although I did. See, this is where it's all screwball. He got married to his second wife sometime before I was 4. And I went and stayed with them for a little bit. And they had the wife had another son. And it didn't last that long. And it felt all bizarre. I'm there, and that fell apart. And then I came back to Grandma and Grandpa again. And then they split up. Long story short, my grandmother took me, grabbed me up, and moved to Texas because that's where she had family and whatnot.
So how old were you when you moved from LA to Texas?
I think it was just before my 5th birthday, maybe sometime between 4 and 5.
And Grandpa didn't go?
No, they were
already split.
Yeah, this was then split. In fact, before that, I remember in the middle of the night, us getting in like a van or something. My grandfather and I, and I think my uncle maybe. And then all of a sudden we were off at some apartment in the middle of the night, sleeping on the floor, and I don't know what's going on.
Wow.
So just trying to roll with it all.
So when did life kind of settle out for you and level out? Or has it yet?
Not even close.
Right.
No, I moved to Texas, and so I went from being the only child thing, and I haven't had any other kids to interact with. And then I moved into the apartment with the grandfather and all of that, and there's other kids there, but I don't know how to, I haven't developed any social skills yet. So I don't know how to share yet and do all that stuff. So it's a lot of tug of war. It was very short lived. And then we go to Texas, and the entire street is just full of kids. And I so badly want to interact with them. Like, yes. And, because of my behavior, I'm actually, they're like, no.
Getting pushed away.
The new kid is like,
what's wrong with this
new
dude?
kid's not cool. He doesn't know how to get along.
It's like he's never seen another kid before.
That is, that really sucks when you're a little kid.
Oh, yeah.
I wanted so bad to get on with those kids, and I just didn't have the tools to do so in that moment. So it was pretty hard. So anyway, so we don't turn the whole thing into my little childhood thing.
No, it's all good.
Which is, I don't know.
So now you're 7, 8, and something happened around 14 years old, in you and music, and tell me a little bit about that.
Actually, be 12. 12 would be another main thing. That's when I was starting to realize some things because, I'm at 12 and I'm out living with my uncle because my grandmother passed. And so now I'm with him. And I went and stayed with my dad with his wife, number 4. And that seemed a little bit more like a family. And there's something in me that said, I think I want to be a part of that instead of just with my uncle in Texas. I think what it was really was God's hand. It was time to get me out of Texas.
Okay.
And so I did. I went out there to see him, and I just never left. And so I had, I was being grafted in with a crowbar into this family. The kid that didn't fit anything else. And at this time, I'm not really good at anything. I'm not a sports kid because I didn't have anybody teach me how to catch and all the hand-eye coordination. So I wasn't a sports kid, and I wasn't really an academic. I was a kid that loved TV and science fiction, and that's about it. And kind of like movies and things like that, but there was no way to connect with other people at that time for it.
Sure.
Then the real thing changes at 14. I got to go see a concert.
What was the concert? It
was Peter Frampton, and I had been listening to that, and it was Peter Frampton Comes Alive, which for many decades, I don't know, maybe even still is, like the largest selling live album in history.
Wow.
It certainly held that status for a long time. And I had an amazing time. Actually, I don't remember how I even got there. Somebody must have taken me. I'm 14, so I'm not driving. So, and it wasn't my parents that took me. They hated that all the music that I listened to. So I don't know. I'll have to figure that out one of these days, how I got there. But I was having a blast. I go, he's having more fun than me.
Yeah.
I want to do that. I mean, it's what every kid does. I want to be a baseball player. I want to be the astronaut. It's like, I want to
Totally.
be the dude that's having such a great time. And I bet he's like rich and he goes and plays places and music and stuff. So I threw everything in me to learn to play guitar and be all about that. That was like, okay, now I went from no direction to like, that's my direction.
So how old were you when you picked up your first guitar?
14.
Okay.
I think I had been given a guitar earlier than that, but I didn't do anything with it.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, there's a guitar. There was no vision for it, so I wasn't going after it. But yeah, 14, I went after it. And for 10 years, there was the goal. Everything I was doing was supposed to be about that. So I was growing my hair out long, which means I couldn't work at all the jobs that my friends were working at. I couldn't go work fast food. They go, well, yeah, you cut your hair, we'll hire you. It's like, nah.
Yeah, it's not worth it.
So I worked lame jobs. And so take that forward to 24. I actually, during that time, there were some very interesting things because it's Hollywood. Kind of Hollywood. I was a Burbank kid. So Burbank's not really Hollywood. It's L.A.
So explain it to me. I'm not from the area. So talk to me about that geographically, how that fits into place.
Yeah, it is. And probably a lot of people listening to this too may not understand this. Like Hollywood, even actors, a lot of actors don't even live in Hollywood. Hollywood is a lot like crackheads and prostitutes. And it's Hollywood itself, the central part that's really Hollywood, is usually not great, especially in Hollywood Boulevard.
Is there anything negative about it? We got crackheads and prostitutes. Is there anything negative about Hollywood? Or is it all that glitz and glam?
Yeah, it's a funky place. But most like actors, they live in like Beverly Hills. They live in Bel Air. They live in, really nice places, and they come there to work. And it's more seedy, but that's where the rock and roll clubs were and all those things. But I lived in Burbank, and back then it was called like the sleepiest town or something. I'm dating myself. Johnny Carson used to call it like the world's largest retirement home or something, it's really was very calm and nothing exciting happened there. And that's a chill place is where I lived.
Like a bedroom community of Hollywood.
Yeah, it is that. I mean, NBC was there and some other things. But anyway, so during this time when I started playing clubs in Hollywood, like right after high school, it was kind of odd. I was playing in Christian bands, and so that was usually like church people were over here and then rock and roll people were over here in clubs. And the two didn't mix.
We're going to come back to that Christianity. We're going to put a pin in it. We're going to circle back to that in a second.
Good.
I want to hear about that.
So here I'm in these Christian bands and like, let's go play clubs. And that was a bit different. And the first Christian band I was in, we were playing everywhere. Most gigging band I've ever been in. We played literally every weekend someplace. Really lame gigs, but we played.
What kind of music were you guys playing? What were you guys doing?
It was kind of like early Christian rock music, kind of rock. Got more rockier at times than others. But we're playing like farmers markets and churches and little churches, big churches, and then that split up, and then I put together a band called Town Crier, and I wanted to go play clubs and do things because I had I skipped a part. I got really, really blessed to learn guitar at one point from a guy named Randy Rhodes.
Who's Randy Rhodes?
Randy Rhodes, he was in a local band called Quiet Riot. And he had gone to the high school that I had, although he was a few years ahead of me. But he was like a local guitar hero dude. And I got to take lessons from him, and that was a game changer. And then Ozzy Osbourne, who had been with Black Sabbath, and put together his own band, and he hired Randy and stole him away from Quiet Riot, which meant that was the end of my guitar lessons.
So was Randy Rhodes Quiet Riot when Quiet Riot was big and made the limelight?
No, that's really that was more of a caricature Quiet Riot. The Quiet Riot that Randy was in I don't think they knew exactly what they wanted to be. They were a cross between Queen and Van Halen or something.
Okay.
It was heavier, but it had a sincerity about it that was on it. But after Randy left, they carried on. But then they became that when they finally did get that, and they come hear the noise, bang your head thing,
Right.
all of that. It was like this strange caricature of what Quiet Riot had been before. But people didn't get to see the real one with Randy. It was amazing with Randy. That was cool. And then also when I was 16, I got to, my dad was driving truck at that time, and he pulled up a generator to Fresno for a concert. And he says, "Do you want to go?" And I said, "Oh, okay, when is this?" And there was no internet. But I did get Circus Magazine. I don't remember that. It's before your time.
Before my time, buddy.
It was kind of like a music magazine, very, very mainstream music magazine. But in the back, they had a list of gigs going on tours and who was playing what where. So I look at the dates. I'm combing through that, and I find it, Fresno, March, whenever it was. I go, "Oh, it's the Fabulous Poodles." Really, that's the name of the band. It's the Fabulous Poodles. I don't know who they are, but I'm going, this sounds like a new wave band. But I thought, it's a professional gig.
Yeah.
I will learn something from it. Because at this time, I'm playing in like a garage band. I was like 2 guitars and a singer singing out of a guitar, one guitar amp.
Been there, man.
You know,
Totally.
I'm at that level. And so I thought, I'll go. My dad asked my sister, "You want to go too?" And she goes, "Who's playing?" Nah.
Yeah.
She passed.
I'll pass. Thank you.
So we get up there, and it's in the middle of the night. We get in the back where all the loading dock is for the venue. And I'm not tired yet, so I get out of the cab and I walk around the joint. I finally get to the front, and there's the big marquee. Van Halen, sold out. Special guest, the Fabulous Poodles.
That's awesome.
I went, okay, this is a whole different thing. But you have to remember, this is 1979, late 78, early 79, somewhere there.
Not to age you, but that's 78 is when I was born.
Yeah, I was a child. I was in diapers, but it was still, I was still there.
So for the listener's perspective, never mind. Anyway, keep going. Keep going.
So if you know Van Halen, the first album had been out, and the second album's about ready to drop. But they had been opening for all these other bands. And this is their first time. It's the first date on their second world tour with them headlining. And I thought, okay. And I barely slept that night. And I'm not a huge Van Halen fan yet because I'm still trying to figure out what they are because they're so different than everything that was happening. But I was there at 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm ready. It's like, okay, I'm going to talk my way into this thing. I'm going to. And I got a whole education. See, the concerts I'd been to, when I would see the lights and the PA, I just thought that was a part of the venue. I didn't know the bands brought that stuff with them.
Yeah.
I had no idea. Why would I know that? And I'm watching, and there's a stage out there, all the scaffolding and a stage at 8 o'clock in the morning, and open up one of their 3 semis, and there's these big pieces of what I know now is truss coming out, and I'm going, okay, what's all that? And then they're putting together this erector set thing, and then there's these guys up in the rafters, and they're walking around like crazy people and attaching straps and dropping chains, and eventually start lifting it off the ground, and then start attaching all the lights because that was back in the day. It was all Licos and Fresnels.
Yeah.
And then getting all that, and then flying the PA, and the band stuff didn't come out, I think, until noon. It was like all that time was just for lights and sound getting up in there. And finally, now something's coming out that I have like some understanding of.
Oh, it's a guitar. I understand that.
Well, you didn't see the guitars yet. I see these walls of speakers and things. And then the band showed up. Oh, what I did is I was trying to see who I could connect with. Who can I network with? I'm 16.
How old are you?
I'm 16.
Okay.
So I'm a kid. I said, hey, you need help? I'm here with my dad. He's got I'm with the band kind of thing. Yeah, my dad's got the generator and whatnot. And so I finally got the drum tech, took me under his wing and said, sure, come on. And so I'm cleaning Heineken off all of Alex Van Halen's drums, from the rehearsals and stuff, and getting all that crap off of there. And so I helped the drum tech. I didn't get to help the guitar tech. That would have been really cool. But whatever. I was happy just to be there.
Yeah.
And so that's all there. And then the band shows up about 3 p.m. And yeah, here's one. It's all this, and they're hearing, okay, there's the guys, and then I'm standing out and kind of on the stage there, and all of a sudden, really loud, like loud. Whatever you're thinking, think about maybe 5 times that.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking something's wrong. Something's wrong going on. So I look to a guy and go, "What's that?" And he goes, "Marshall!" And just all of a sudden, bah! Eddie's playing, and which was 10 times louder than what the white noise was that I was hearing. It was the gain from the amp.
Wow.
And you couldn't have that. If we did that at church and that kind of thing came out,
gosh.
somebody goes, they'd be calling in like emergency teams. It was that loud on that. And then I saw them do this rehearsal, which was David Lee Roth riding around on his skateboard out in front because they hadn't put all the chairs down yet. And he's riding around with his wireless microphone. He would start like the first line of something, and then they do this, and they'd sing their harmonies, and he would tell the sound guy in front of house, all right, do this, do that. And first time I ever seen harmonizers, I didn't know what they were. Eventide 910s.
Yeah.
And things like that. And it just sounded.
What's a harmonizer?
Oh, a harmonizer is it's a piece of line gear that you use in a sound system or a guitar system that changes pitch, sometimes micro pitches, sometimes bigger ones. So I think what they were doing that was to fatten up the vocals.
Gotcha.
So they were using that. So it's very early, very, very early outboard gear because this is late 70s, early 79.
Everything was big and heavy and lots of it.
So anyway, I'll wrap this story up. The cool thing is my job during the gig, as I was on stage, I was to guard Michael Anthony's basses so they wouldn't go away. So I got to stand on the stage for the whole concert.
That's cool.
The Fabulous Poodles showed up in the station wagon.
Yeah. Well, there we go.
And everybody's throwing milk cartons and things at them because they're New Wave guys.
And your sister missed out on the whole thing.
Oh, my sister cried.
That's funny.
When we told her, she started crying. But, there's a lot of awesome stuff. Here's where God gave me so many amazing opportunities to nothing that I did. It wasn't because of me or anything. It was just like, okay, here's this incredible opportunity.
Sure.
And there I am. And
let's go back and talk about God. So when did you become a Christian? You mentioned it a couple times. That's how we met. It's still active in your world.
Yeah.
When did you become a Christian? Tell me about that and that transition, how that happened.
Good. So my grandmother was a very strong believer, and she would take me to church. And, when you're a kid, everything is normal because you don't know any different. So I'd go in and doing that, and I don't really have a connection to this. I remember trying to have some conversations with God, but not really understanding much of that. So that's early childhood. And then we go to church like a lot of American families. It's Easter, so you go to church, or it's Christmas Eve and you go to church. And it's those things. But I didn't really become a believer, a follower, Christ follower, until I was 16. And that was very cool. That was my brother who went and got saved. Somebody took him to church, to this one church, and then my brother said, "Hey, you got to come to this church." I said, "I've been to church." And he goes, No, this is different. This is not like the churches that we've been to. I said, "Oh, yeah?" And so, he talked me into coming, and I went, and he was right. It was very different. Here were people that were on fire for Jesus.
That's cool.
And that makes such a difference.
Totally.
And, through that process, actually through my brother, my entire family became saved and became Christ followers.
Wow.
All because of that. And I have to ask him who brought him. I'll have to find that out. But that 16 years of age, I'm 2 years into trying to be a rock and roll dude. My hair's getting long. I got Led Zeppelin and Kiss albums. And that's at the time when that wasn't very fashionable for Christians.
Yeah.
To be listening to rock and roll. And I did end up throwing some of my albums away and definitely regretted it later and bought those albums later. And going through that was being at 16. And then as a result of that, being in Christian bands at 18 and doing that's a paradigm shift, actually. It's the whole thing. It's like my life is going one direction. You meet Jesus, and then all of a sudden it takes a different turn. In that, even though I can see his hand on me prior to that experience. And his sovereignty in it.
That's
So
cool.
that's what that was. And so I guess the next landmark in that timeline would be at 24. And that's when at this point, I've been trying to do music for 10 years.
Okay.
So when I was 14, and I thought, oh yeah, by the time I'm in 20s, 10 years, if I'm not touring around and being what my dream is, I'll at least be making some kind of living in music. And I was not. No, it was pay to play in LA.
Wow.
So you didn't make money. It cost you really money to go and play. And I worked at some music stores, worked at Guitar Center for a short time and other places. I gave guitar lessons. I would, do those things and had a sound company with a buddy of mine. And we'd make a few bucks here and there, but those were side hustles. They were never primary areas of revenue. So when I got to be 24 and I've been playing these clubs, we were supposed to open for Guns N' Roses and they'd never open. So we just played the whole gig.
So weird. You had a Guns N' Roses crowd?
I don't even know. It was such a weird thing. I barely remember them. I barely remember that on that. I actually even question sometimes my memory. It says, what's that really the deal? But I know it was like we were playing and it seemed like an off night, like a Thursday or something. And I think they just
didn't show.
I didn't care. I think maybe they did a sound check. I don't know, but it just never ended up happening. I had the guys from Def Leppard come and sit at my table after the Pyromania album, and we were there to see, was it Winger? Not Winger. There was a band from like Netherlands or something that had one hit, and there was this young 18-year-old kid that was opening for them, and he just tore that place up. And that's when Joe Elliott and Phil Collin had just joined Def Leppard, and they walked in. They had no place to sit. And I had a couple seats at my table, so
that's so cool.
And they came and sat at our table.
Dude, the experiences you had growing up in that area and putting yourself in that position, I mean, they're legendary stories. They're awesome.
Yeah, they are. You look at it, some of those people became really famous afterwards, or some of them were famous at that time. And then Rudy Sarzo, who used to be in Quiet Riot, who was touring maybe with Ozzy then, he came and took Joe and Phil from my table. Like, oh, okay, you're going to go be with the other famous guys.
Yeah.
But the 18-year-old dude who was tearing it up, that was Yngwie Malmsteen's first performance in the United States. Do you know who he is?
I don't. Tell me.
He is a guitar virtuoso from Sweden. And he's like, if you think like the most flamboyant, exquisite concert violinist and all of that, he's that, but on a guitar.
Wow.
And he just tore the place up. In fact, by the time the other band I can't think of the name of, it was like in slow motion. It's like I'm sure they hated following him.
Yeah. So at 24, you were saying something earlier about your singer leaving the band, and that was a pivotal moment. What happened then? We didn't get into it. I don't know the story. So tell me the story there.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing me back on that, because that one is like a next major
And I know you said
deal.
That happened, and then there was like a 10-year hiatus. Walk me through that.
Yeah, because I've been doing music for 10 years, trying to do everything. I got to be 24, and the singer of my band decided, I'm leaving. Another one of the singers who thinks that he's not, he's too good or whatnot. And so
singers, that's the way they all are.
I think it's all about them.
Uh-huh.
And I thought, I'm starting over again. We're starting over again. I'm 24, and I think my life is half over because I'm 24.
Right, of course.
I'm 24, and I'm starting over again. And I thought, I'm not making a living in this. And also, I've been watching other bands make it around us. It's like Rat was a band that was playing clubs same time we were. And then they got signed. And I went, really? The Rodent Band? The Rodent Band got signed. They did have a couple cool songs. The one that really tripped me out was actually Motley Crue, because they were all about goat heads and pentagrams, and it was all this like satanic stuff. And
were you guys playing the same circuits?
We played same clubs. We didn't play same gigs.
Yeah.
Our crowd would not be a Motley Crue crowd. But they were like, I don't know, they're doing seances out there and Ouija boards or something. That's what they were all about. That was their whole image. And I heard they got signed, and I went, what?
Wow.
What? Middle America is never going to accept these guys. Who's going to do the satanic dudes?
They're never going to make it.
But somebody went there and cleaned those guys up. They got all glam and they wrote some pretty good songs. And I was totally wrong because they changed everything and were very successful. But I just kept seeing that and I was going, this is not a predictable trajectory for a career.
Sure.
You cannot control this. It's so much luck of the draw and so many other things. So I got scared. I thought I could be 50 years old and only know how to play guitar. And so now I'm playing like the Blue Room at the Ramada Inn, singing Feelings. And if you know that song, then you can tell how old I am. If you're doing these songs of like, for your dinner, you're playing for your dinner thing, and this is how you make a living. Well, I got scared, so I had a really serious talk with the Lord. Because I thought I may have my ladder up against the wrong wall. And I said, Lord, what do you want me to do? What is my mission? If you have something else different that you want me to do, I will put all this on the altar and I will walk away from it. But please don't let me end up at the Ramada Inn. I don't want to be that guy. It was a very sincere, I think I'd had similar prayers, but that's the first time I was so spot on sincere with God on it. And I didn't realize it, but right after that, everything started changing. I didn't see it till much later. I run across this magazine. It's issue 1 of a magazine, behind the scenes movie making thing, and talking about the movie Alien. And I'm reading about how the face hugger, if you guys know the movie, John Hurt, famous actor, he got this kind of massive looking scorpion thing on his face, which puts him into a coma. And these things happened, and I just thought they were brilliant. I thought, they look anatomically correct. This looks like something that could have lived in prehistoric times or something. It's very plausible. And I was intrigued by that. So I thought, I wonder if I can make that. Because I was reading a little bit how they made it. It was very brief in the description. So I went to the craft store, got clay and plaster and things, and I fumbled around, and into 7 weeks, I had like a crude version of what that was. And that was a game changer.
Wow. So what happened next?
Somebody offered to buy it. So I was taking it down to Westwood. I was partying the crowds like the Red Sea. They see me walking with this thing, and everybody's backing off.
Yeah.
Like, what the heck, man? And some guy offered me good money for it, which was good money for me because I think I'm like working at 7-Eleven or something. And he offered me like a week's pay or something. I said, I won't sell you this one because this one has sentimental value. I'll make you another one that would be so much better than this. And then I did. And then Halloween's coming, so I'm thinking, maybe I can take the same skills. Maybe I can, sculpt and clay. Maybe I can make some like prosthetic makeups and take those same things and do some fun stuff for Halloween. So I thought, I want to make a Planet Apes makeup. But those materials were expensive because they're in bulk. And I didn't have that kind of money. So I did a primitive caveman version of crowdfunding. I went to all my friends and said, hey, you give me some money and I'll make you a custom makeup. And you give me some money. So I pulled this money together to be able to buy these supplies. And then I did these really like funky makeups that I did, had photos. And then I would go around. I thought, the guys that do this for the movies, they probably make decent money and it's way better than my day job. So I thought, while I'm waiting for my music ship to arrive, maybe I can do this. And so I would network. I would always have my little photos with me. And then I would go around and kind of seek out these places that were makeup effect shops where they're like industrial units where they're doing, and a lot of times they have the doors up because it's hot in LA as they're working. And I could kind of go up and chat up, hey, what are you making there? That looks pretty cool. And talk them up a little bit and then say, I'm kind of doing some stuff. Can you look at my pictures and maybe give me some pointers? Oh, like you are kind of doing some of this stuff. And they would look at it and then tell me what I'm doing wrong and better ways to do things. So I kept harassing people long enough. Eventually I got a job in a little shop doing everything that nobody else wanted to do, the sweeping of the floors, the cleaning out the shark mold, pulling the clay out of it and all these things. But it was that was a game changer because I had a job doing it.
And how old were you when you stepped into that role?
I think I was 24.
Okay.
I think I was still 24 on that, maybe 25, but I think it was 24.
Yep.
And then once you get your first job, then you have some credibility. It's not like I want to be this. Oh, I've done this, and now I'm looking for my next gig. And so I would work. I would get the occasional job where I could get in and go do that. And the rest of the time, I'm just picking up some work on the side, other things I'm doing. But eventually, I was able to get in NBC studios and take over their little itty bitty closet of a prosthetic lab, so I could like make some things. So they didn't know how to do that stuff then, because they were doing all these like soap operas and talk shows and things, so they didn't know that kind of work. And they said, okay, well, show us how to do things you're doing, and we'll teach you beauty makeup. So that changed a lot because I learned how to be like a full service makeup artist. So I was working on Tonight Show and
Tonight Show with?
Well, in the beginning, it was with Johnny Carson. And it's the very, very end of Johnny Carson's run. And then I would always know when Jay Leno was coming to guest host because there'd be some crazy car parked next to the stage.
Wow.
So that would be cool. It's like, oh, there's a Lamborghini. Okay, that means Jay's here tonight. So I would do that. And, Dick Clark was doing this thing called Super Bloopers and Practical Jokes. It was like a variety show thing. And they would have me make some things for that. So it was good. Make me more rounded. But, getting in fully into the union that's always a tough thing to do. But it was at the time when Star Trek was running, Next Generation, that show was happening. There was a TV show called Alien Nation. I don't know if you remember that.
I don't.
It was based off of a movie James Caan was in, but there was a TV show. And so between those two shows, they were sucking up all the people that knew how to do prosthetics. So they would run out of folks, and that's when I could step in. So I was able to work on that and eventually get enough days just between those two shows and the other things.
Star Trek?
Yeah, Star Trek, Alien Nation, and My Two Dads.
Okay.
And other, things I was able to get in on. And then finally I was able, to be in the union. And first feature film I worked on was Star Trek 6, actually, Undiscovered Country.
Oh, wow.
Which was great. Because that was my favorite TV show as a kid was Star Trek. So that was
So now you're getting to work on it and do your makeup, and what started with nothing. That was pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was. It's when you get to do stuff that's like from your childhood, those are usually high watermarks. Like if you get to work with an artist, like I know that you're big on Garth Brooks. If you got to do something with him, would be, be so much meaning for you.
Totally.
Or to do something with the Eagles or Don Henley. It would be like.
Yeah, it would be pretty freaking awesome. Garth, if you're watching this, have me on your show. Have me out there with you. I want to play drums for you.
So I got into about the same time I got married to my first wife, and we're trying to make it go. We're young folks trying to make it go like everybody else does. But I'm starting to work on Star Trek, and that was pretty cool. And I was able to embrace into different things pretty quickly. I was a young guy that it was really pursuing like a lot of the more advanced techniques and whatnot.
So what are some of the other shows you worked on besides The Alien Nation, Star Trek, Tonight Show, Jay Leno, Johnny Carson? The list is going on and on. Give me the music discography. Give me your rundown.
I'll try to do what they are. There's so many things I go, oh, that's right, I worked on that. I forget. But there was all kinds of movies. Patriot Games I worked on. I did Young Riders. We did that in Tucson, Arizona. Western things. That was my Western film I got to do.
Nice.
TV show with Josh Brolin, actually, who became a big deal. And I did a lot of different TV shows, and then I would also go do movies in between, like especially when the TV show would be on hiatus. So I could do those. I did a Bruce Willis movie. I did worked on Congo, with Stan Winston's crew for a day. Did several movies. What's his name? Arnold Schwarzenegger. I blanked on his name for a minute. And that was really cool. My friend Jeff Don was doing all of Arnold's movies at that time. So I did Last Action Hero. We did Eraser. We did. I did some design stuff for him when Arnold was in Mr. Freeze and the Batman thing, and it was, all kinds of movies that were
The
with
Grinch.
That. Grinch also, yeah.
What was everybody knows the Grinch. That's fairly popular, and fairly recent. What was your role in the Grinch? What did you do there?
I was a makeup artist. I was there working for Rick Baker, major Oscar winner, who designed the film, and I was one of a number of people. They had a really large makeup crew.
Wow!
And at that time, it was the largest. When we did it, we were the largest makeup crew in history on a film.
Wow!
Now there's other ones that have surpassed it since. But that was cool because I was already, what I had done, which we didn't talk about, is I had created this side business doing a magazine called Makeup Artist Magazine. And I was also starting to produce a trade show called IMATS, which was the International Makeup Artist Trade Show. So I had this significant side hustle that was starting to go. So it was nice. I could go do the Grinch. I could do that in the mornings, go get my makeups done, and then have lunch. And then we do after lunch touch-ups on the makeups, because that's always hard on the makeup when talent is eaten and you got something sticking out, and get them all done. And then they would let me go, and I could go to the office and try to run my other game, because they all had buy-in. Rick Baker, he was on the cover of issue 2. He's been on the cover more than anybody else ever had on the magazine. So they cared that I was doing what I was doing, so they ran interference for me. Pirates of the Caribbean, I went and worked on that a few days. I wish I would have worked on it more, actually.
Wow. So when you're doing these shows and you're doing makeup, do you have a character that you stay with and work on all the time? Or do you bounce around, or a little bit of both? How does that work?
Everything under the sun.
Okay.
They're all different. Depends on the film, depends on the day. Are you doing somebody that's the main actor, or are you doing somebody that's in the background that you probably will never know? And everything in between. It's whatever's needed to tell the story.
What was in your Hollywood makeup artist days, what was your highest point that you, like the pinnacle, if you're looking back?
There's the pinnacle. It's different ways you can measure that. Like I get that question a lot. Like what was the coolest thing you worked on? Well, the coolest thing you worked on is not necessarily the thing that people know about the most.
Sure.
You can work on something that's really famous and it was a hell shoot. And you can also work on something that like everybody goes, what? And that was like the coolest thing you ever worked on.
Yeah.
So it's the perception of what it is when you're working on it is very different than the perception of watching it, being the viewer. Those are very, very different. But I'll give you one I think that kind of works with what you have. I was making I was climbing the ladder. I was working with all the right people. And like working with Jeff was really great because here he's on some of the biggest films in Hollywood, biggest budgets are these Arnold Schwarzenegger movies of the 90s. And so I'm doing that. And then the guy that was his second in command, he would go do films and he would ask me to come be his second. So that's cool. It's kind of moving up that way. And then Jeff asked me to be...
Who is Jeff?
Sorry, Jeff Don. He was the guy I spoke about earlier who does Arnold Schwarzenegger movies.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, yep, I'm with you.
Like when we did Jingle All the Way. Yeah, it was that one. He had me be second unit. I was department head of makeup for second unit. And second unit is huge on an Arnold film because second unit means you don't have the principal actors. So that means that's all the stunt doubles. All the stunts that are being done, and all the secondary actors and all of that's huge. In fact, second unit is bigger than a lot of other movies.
Wow.
So, I'm doing those things. It was great. It got to be when I had the second issue of the magazine where I had to turn down Jim Cale. He wanted me to come be a second on a film in Mexico, and I just couldn't. I was like, the magazine this thing going, and I couldn't drop to go do that, and I had to turn it down. It's one of those points where you have to make that decision. Which direction are you going?
So I was going to ask you, my next follow-up question to that was going to be, tell me your lowest point. Would that be one of your lowest points?
No.
What was your lowest point in Hollywood with the makeup industry?
Wow. No one's asked me that one.
There we go.
What is
We
the
talk about
lowest
low
point?
points. They all know about my low points.
Well, there's lots of low points because as an artist, an artist has these insecurities anyway, and that certainly we haven't even talked about that. Whereas I have people a lot of times they see my boldness, and I am a bold person, but I also have a lot of insecurities, and luckily the boldness it keeps the insecurity in check. Otherwise, I'd just be in a corner and not achieve anything. But boldness helps with that. But artists have that anyway. So even doing a makeup, you go through and you go, oh, okay, this is going to be great. It's going to be great. And you start doing it. I think it's doing a song like this. Playing live could be like this. You're getting going into makeup. Okay, it looks good. And it's like, oh, no, it's going the wrong way. And oh, this kind of sucks. And I'm not good. And I'm a fraud. I can't really do this. And oh, what's it going to be? And then like, okay, there we go. There we go. All right. And okay, good. It's not bad. And then you go on thinking, yeah, look, this is looking good now. Yeah. It's good. And then you go, yeah, look at that, man. I am all that in a bag of chips. And you go through this roller coaster of thinking that you're amazing and that you are not worthy and you suck. And all that can happen within a makeup, much less the career. If I try to think of when the low points are, there was a film, I quit a film because what was going on, there were some weird things happening. And I did not control that one very well. I hadn't been in the business long enough to know how to really handle that.
Yeah.
And that was a really hard one. That was one where, I finally got to the point where I can't handle these people and I just quit. And you're not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
I made a mistake.
How long had you been in the business at that point?
Oh, I don't know. I've been in the business for a bit, but to be in those, it's one thing when if you're leading a job. I mean, think about that. Like when we go do those weddings and whatnot, and you're sure. The point of the spear from our department, so to speak.
I'm with you.
And it's another thing. It's one thing when somebody else is the point of the spear, and then you're being a part of it. You haven't had to be the point of the spear, because the point of the spear, you get a whole different pressure.
Totally.
And what's going on. I hadn't had enough pressure test to have the tools and the experience to draw upon to be able to handle the situation that I was in. And so I folded.
Gotcha.
And that was a low point.
Yeah. So back in my world, if I was in court, there's some things we can't talk about on the stand. It may be the glaring obvious statement that needs to be made, or it may be the explanation that answers the question that everybody is beating around the bush about, but I'm not allowed to say it for different reasons, hearsay, whatever it may be, until the defense attorney asks me a question that relates to it, and it's opening the door. Then I can run through that door, and I can get everything I need to say out until somebody tells me to be quiet. You opened a door a second ago, so I'm going to go through it. Let's talk about insecurities. What are your insecurities? From the outside, we all have this persona that we got our, act together, our shit's tight, and we just go through life, being bold and out there in the front. And you're a Hollywood makeup artist. You've got you can throw around more names than anybody else I know. Every person listening to this podcast has seen the Grinch in your work. They don't even know that you're behind the work on those makeups, but you're there. You've roadied for Van Halen. You have opened for Guns N' Roses and then took their concert. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. From the outside looking in, I mean, you're a stud. But we know behind the scenes, there's a lot of insecurities. I'm insecure sitting here right now on this show because I know that camera's on me. And there's things I'm not happy with about my body and the way that I look and my head size and all that other crap. Those are my insecurities. What are your insecurities that have kind of been lingering in the background?
Oh, there's so many of what that is. Like when I was a younger kid, it was being young. I'm too young. I don't have credibility. I'm just a kid, so nobody's going to listen to me. So that can be an insecurity. To be able to anything that I was trying to do, I felt like everything was easier for everybody else. And I really do believe that, even still to this day. I have to work harder, I think, than most people to achieve things. Anything I've done, whether it's makeup, it's guitar, anything that I've tried to achieve, it's never been easy. I've had to fight and go and until everything to finally get that where the other guy go, and then they're there. It's so much harder for me, and so that part is hard for me. So there's times when here I've been nominated 5 times for an Emmy and I have 2. Some people go, oh well, this guy is an expert. He knows what he's talking about. Well, in one sense, I am, but in other senses, no one knows everything. Sure. No one knows the entire thing. There's things I don't know. There's things that I do. There's things I do well. And there's things I don't do well, and that can be as a player or artistry or whatever. But if something that is exploiting my weaknesses and I can't bring my strengths to bear, then I'm operating in weakness.
Do you find yourself wanting to quit in those moments? You quit when the pressure was too high because you hadn't been pressure tested. Now you're having something exploiting your weaknesses. You can't compensate with your positives and your strengths. Do you find yourself wanting to quit in those moments? And have you ever quit besides that time we spoke about?
I think
because of that issue.
I think I did that on the film because one of a trigger. Everybody has triggers things. It's like things that are going to get you goat. And like what was it with Michael J. Fox on Back to the Future? Is he chicken? I think that was the thing that they used as the trigger. So one of my triggers is if somebody's like sliding me or trying to looking down their nose at me, or like they're trying to play a game on me, like you're trying to scam me or something like that. That can really trigger me. And in fact, it happened to me just a few days ago. And I hate that because I'm always trying to get past that and not let that guy control my life.
Yeah, totally.
And there's times when it does, and it's like, sucks, because I've grown so much and have so many more tools. But every once in a while, that guy will rear his head. In fact, Thompson talks about that in Verbal Judo in the book. I like how he talks about that guy.
Yep.
And there are those for me. Somebody will slight me and try to do that and then make me, and then I can get sad. In fact, today it even happened. I had a thing where I had to have a meeting with somebody. I went and showed up on time to the meeting, and they weren't prepared for the meeting. They were totally distracted. They were working at a restaurant, and we were supposed to have a sit-down meeting. She never did. She would talk to me for a second and then go take care of somebody. And it's like, okay, I'm chopped liver.
Yeah, totally.
And we can't have a proper conversation and there's that guy in me that's going, screw this. Just screw this.
Yeah. So you live now Pacific Northwest, which is a long ways from Hollywood, California.
Yeah.
How did you end up moving here to the Pacific Northwest? What drew you here? What brought you here? I know you were married. You've got some kids. Tell me a little bit about how you got here. And then I want to talk about the loss of identity through your company. And because that is going to resonate with me, the loss of identity, and then kind of starting your new life with where you are today.
Yep. Like I said earlier, I got married, and my wife was originally from Eugene, Oregon. She had come down to LA and was trying to make it in music. And I met her, and we were 2 young people kind of fumbling around, just trying to make a go of life, and found each other, and we got married. And as we were dating, I said, I know you're from, like Oregon, but we're getting serious now. And so I need to tell you that I'm never moving away from LA. This is what I do. I'm doing the makeup thing, the music thing. It's like, I'm not moving there. So we need to have that out in the open and know that. It was all right. And so we get married, and then we were trying to think how many years. Well, we would come up once a year to come visit her folks in Eugene. So we would drive up, do our road trip. Her and I would come up, and they didn't even live in Eugene. They lived a half an hour outside of Eugene, out in the country. So I'm a city boy. So I go out in this thing, and it's like watching paint dry for a week.
Yeah.
So I would break up the monotony of that by taking a day trip up to Portland.
Okay.
So we were out for a week. In the middle of it, I'll go to Portland and, do things, go find stuff.
Get a city refresh.
Yeah. And, go find things. Like one time I'm trying to buy a scanner and there are no scanners in Eugene. So maybe they got some in Portland. So as these day trips to Portland were really important because I like right away I find like, wow, the greatest bookstore in the whole world is in Portland, Oregon. There's this Powell's bookstore, it's 4 stores. This thing is amazing. There's this bookstore. And then I find this great video store because back then we rented videos.
Sure.
Movie Madness that had this really cool in Portland. They have movies that nobody else does and all these things. I thought that's really cool. And then I discovered the best pizza place in the world was in Portland.
What's that?
It was Flying Pie Pizzeria.
Oh, yeah.
And that was...
Kind of funny story about Flying Pie, but...
there's a whole other story. I could keep telling stories all day. But so I found that. And so it's like over the years, I kept collecting these places. So like, oh, that's a good place. That's a good place. And adding it to my repertoire of what Portland was. And then when my son was born, my second child... and I was going to do my day trip, my in-laws, who were fabulous people and still are, they said, why don't you leave the kids with us and you guys get a night away? I'm like, oh, because they're that kind of great humans. And I had never seen Portland at night because when the sun was starting to go down, that was usually my cue to head south to Eugene. So we stayed the night. We stayed at the Benson Hotel over on Broadway, which was built in 1912, same year as Titanic, so it was really cool. Had a great steak dinner, and I saw Portland at night. I'm going, wow, what a great city. This is a really charming city at night. And all that. So when I drove away the next morning as we head back for Eugene, I said to my then wife, I said, you know what? Portland's a city you can live in. It's got all these things. It's got an international airport. And unbeknownst to me, she had been praying, asking for God to do something so that she could come back to the Pacific Northwest. She hadn't said anything to me because of...
You're tied to L.A.
Well, because we established in the beginning that it wasn't going to happen. And when I said that, she just lit up. And there's this... we could do a whole podcast just on how that transitioned, but we won't. But that's the time that I saw God's hand moving in real time. Usually when I see God's done something, I see it in hindsight and go, that's what you did. Oh, that's what you did. This time I had a front row seat and I was watching it happen, him make all the changes to move us north. There's never been another time in my life like that.
That's cool.
Before or since. It was really, really something. And so in 2004, we moved north, and so I've been here for 20 years now.
Wow. And then eventually you had kids. Kids grew up over in the Vancouver area, and eventually you got divorced. What year did you get divorced?
I think we split in 2018, and all this happens like leading up to, there was like the perfect storm that was starting to happen. Trade shows, because now I'm not really doing makeup hardly. Very, very, very rarely. All my income comes from the magazine and the trade shows. And at the end, I think it was the very end of 2017, is that the first time we saw a show that was like, oh, our numbers, what happened? Our numbers were off. It wasn't quite right. And so we looked at that and we thought, okay, we can probably, it's the first time we did it this date in the calendar. Oh, okay, we'll move it back to like where it should be. And then the next show was slightly off. And we thought, oh, it was that. It wasn't until like 3-4 shows in that we realized there's a pattern here.
Numbers are dropping.
I'm doing 6 shows a year around the world.
Wow. I'm
doing New York. I'm doing LA. I'm doing Sydney, Australia. I'm doing Toronto, Canada. I'm doing Vancouver, Canada. And I probably left one out. But,
Were you in England at that time or no?
No, that wasn't the England show at that time.
Okay.
It was the first show that went soft was Toronto.
Okay.
It's like, And my marriage had been it had been going downhill for a while, and it was never really great. It was a hard marriage. And it only lasted as long as it did because both of us really hate divorce.
Yeah.
We just like, let's figure this out. There's times when I would be strong and rally, and then there's times I'm being weak and she'd be strong and rally, but we were holding it together.
Sure.
But
and you mentioned a time where there was some stress manifestation going on. They got really, really hard for you. And you said it was the first time you felt that physical manifestation of stress, which reminds me of my situation, ultimately being hospitalized with these, stroke-like symptoms. And when you were talking to me, it really resonated with me. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was around 2007. I did something. I fell. I did what magazine publishers that have single titles do. You think, oh, I know how to do this. I'm successful at it. And I have an art department. I have an editorial department. I've got this infrastructure to publish magazines. So you're thinking, well, you're publishing one. How hard can it be to publish two? You already got people to do it, kind of. So I started a second magazine, and I tried to make a consumer magazine, and it was more expensive to do, a lot more expensive to do because we had to do photo shoots and there's other things that we were doing. I was pretty excited about it, and I was convinced it was going to be the big deal, and I was wrong. I was wrong, and there was all this lead up to it. I was at the cusp where I had the contract on my desk to sign for this distribution deal that we would have had to really ramp up our printing to be in all these grocery stores and all these bookstores, all the Barnes and Nobles, all the Borders, everything was out there. We would have had to spend all that money for all the magazines, but I can't break down it would take too long to explain the insanity of magazine publishing.
Sure.
But we would have had to put out all this money, and we would have been liable for all of it.
Okay.
And I ultimately backed off and going, this is not working. And it was tough because we put all the money out to do it. Made the mistake of putting up, creating a lot of expense before you have the revenue.
Oh, yeah.
And I got really worried. I thought I could lose my house, lose all the financial assets that I have. And I felt it all crushing down. And I was in panic mode. We only had 2 shows a year that we were doing at that time. And, but I would wake up in the night, and the second I would wake up, also, bam, the heat would hit me. It would hit me in the small of my back, the back of my neck. Also, it was like on fire.
Wow.
And I would immediately sweating like a sprinkler. My body was just manifesting all this stress. And I'd have to get out of the bed because I'm starting to soak the bed, and I'm on fire, and I couldn't sleep. And that's the worst stress I've ever experienced in my life. And so what we did is I took a serious look at it and going, okay, I got to get rid of this other magazine thing. We're not doing anything with that. Where do we make money? I'm not really a money-driven guy. I never have been. Luckily, the things I do have been enough to carry it. But that was a moment where I go, all right, where do we make money? And looking and going, well, see, there's the magazine, but my other magazine. But the trade shows are really making the money. All right, we need to do more of these.
Reinvest in that.
And so that's when we started adding shows, and we did that, and it got us out of the hole.
So then eventually that all leads to your separation, divorce.
Yeah. And the trade shows going down and all that. So I'm getting the double whammy.
Now we're into COVID.
It's about ready to hit that. That's the triple whammy. But if we start with the double whammy, it's like where the honeymoon's over, and that's like we're going to have to. I was trying. Did you ever see the movie Minority Report with Tom Cruise?
Yes.
Where there's people.
Like the one movie I've ever seen. Yes, I saw it. That and Dumb and Dumber.
Well, that movie, if you guys have not seen it, is where they have these people who can kind of thought police who can see the future sort of thing, and then they try to prevent crimes before they happen with these people. They're these like savants who are able to see that. And then they saw the thing that Tom Cruise, the lead actor in it, saw him committing a homicide, and he's like, what the heck? I don't even know this guy. And then he runs, and he's trying to. The last thing that Tom Cruise's character wants to do is be anywhere near this guy that he supposedly kills, who doesn't even have any idea who he is. So he's trying to avoid that like the plague, right?
Sure.
But eventually he comes to this precipice where he's right in front of this guy, and the moment has been created. It's like, damn. He wanted to avoid that. And that's the way I was feeling about divorce. It's like, I don't want to get divorced. I don't want to get divorced. I'm in my 50s now. I don't want to press the reset button.
Yeah.
And we got to the place, and there's the reset button, and had to be pressed. And that was, that's, anybody getting divorced is a big deal. When you have 30 years of marriage, yeah, that's quite the investment that you're tanking. And then my business is doing a thing. And so, yeah, that caused, here's all the stress again.
Yeah.
I have to my life is starting over. What are we doing, Lord? What's going on? And so that was one of the greatest valleys of my life. I was worried I thought, wow, companies all slowing down all of this. And then the COVID thing goes. We produce trade shows. It's now illegal to have an in-person event.
Right.
I cannot function. I can't work. I thought, what are we going to do? There's still all these bills to pay. And it got to this place where I'm going, am I going to become homeless? Am I going to have to sleep in the car, live in the car? I really get worried at the point as I move out of my house because I'm having to sell it because I'm getting divorced and even eventually had to sell my building that I have for my business to be able to pay those bills. To see all of that coming down, it was stripping everything from me of what I do, and that was super hard. But the upside of that is one really amazing season of seeking the Lord. I would go out and do these walks around my building. I would just have to get out from behind my desk. It's like there's this thing, and it's like I can only do so much, and take a break from that and go out, and I would go walk with the Lord. I would walk and talk to Him. I would sing praise songs to Him that I knew from when I was a teenager, and do that. It was they were cries of desperation to my God. And you knew me through that part of it. You saw me how affected I was by it.
And that's what I was just going to say. So for the listener's point of view and for those folks out there, Double Down was established in 2018. It was established as a duo. 1 year later, we got asked to put together a 5-piece band. And during that, I had the privilege of working with some amazing musicians at the local churches. My lips aren't moving with my voice, and it's annoying. So,
yeah, I saw that. I'm hoping in post that it all pans
we'll
out.
Sync it up. If not, it's no big deal. So anyway, I got to put those 5 people together to build that 5-piece band. Michael Key was one of them, and it was such a privilege to play with this guy because I played with him, hundreds of times at church. But now we're getting to play outside of church, kind of like his whole journey from his earlier years. So we're going to play outside of church. But that's about the time that he's hitting the, climax of this low point. And I saw the desperation. I saw the darkness. I feared for him because I had known him for a long, long time, but I had seen myself in that same place. And I know where I went in that place, and it wasn't to God. It was to the woods with a gun. And there was a period of time there where I was very worried about him. And he would come to these practices and play music, and he would walk in completely defeated, and he would leave with a little bit of hope and inspiration. And I remember it was, from my perspective, it was a positive thing. And then we got past it, just like every bump in the road, and unbeknownst to me, he's praying. But, we get past that, and then we start playing out, and all of a sudden I start to see him brighten up a little bit, and there's women coming to see him play. And
that's right,
they're showing up, and these women are showing up in droves to see Hollywood do his thing. And I'm like, what are we doing here? And then this one showed up, and her name was Gail. And she was different than the rest, and she's got this little squeaky sneeze. And
she does.
Gail showed up, and Gail's still around. Tell me about Gail. Tell me about that.
One thing for the correction of that, it's like when you got out of the cover band that you had going, and I knew you weren't happy with that, and you weren't to put one together. You asked me to be in a band. Let's put something together.
Yeah.
And I told you that I couldn't at that time because I was, my previous wife, we were having hard times, and she didn't want me to do anything like that, so I had to say no. And then. It was actually when I got to play for you guys, it ended up being this coincidence, maybe not, that the last Christmas party I threw for my company that we did at Salud, and it just so happened you guys were booked.
Yeah.
And so then he said, "Why don't you come play?" I was okay. I'll come play some. And
Come
that was our first time.
That was our first time playing
outside
together.
church.
Outside of church, yep.
On that, and go back to what your question was.
So Gail, tell me about Gail. Let's get to Gail.
There was the gig that was before Gail. There was the one time you got me to go play Washougal Times.
Yeah,
I never want to play that place again. And I had two girls that I was kind of interested in on the Match.com and thing like that, and they both showed up at the same gig, and that was interesting. But
you handled it well.
My lovely bride Gail, she was. That was an awesome thing of God to bring us together, and luckily He did that just pre-COVID, because dating during COVID was not successful for a lot of people, and it would have been for me.
So Gail comes around, and what I remember about Gail is she was a keeper because she likes to drink Moscato. And
yes, she does, especially that first gig that she came to.
So did we. So she was a keeper. But that's awesome. So as far as I want to go all the way back to the beginning before we wrap this up.
Let me touch on one thing too.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Gail come into my life. We just celebrated our 3rd anniversary, which is awesome. And we were dating for like 2 years before that. And it's something when you're on the other side of a great valley. When you're in the valley, you can't see outside of the valley because you're in it. You can't see what's beyond. Sure. Like that. And in The Hobbit, they do that. In Mirkwood, if you know the book. And they thought, they were in great despair when they got to the top of the trees to see, and all they can see is forest, and they didn't realize they were in. Anyway, there's my Tolkien metaphor for the one time they'll do on the show. But that's the way that I was in that valley, couldn't see where it is, and it's awesome now to look back on this valley that I've gone through, and I'm past that and on the other side of it. I never could have had any vision that I would be at this place now and be okay. I'm not living in my car.
So cool.
I never was homeless, and God always did provide everything for me. And I have this woman who loves me to death and is so good for me.
That's so cool. Going back to your first 7, 8, 9 years, the tumultuous years, do you see those years having an effect on the rest of your life? Or do you feel you got past them? Does that question make sense?
I think so. I think what you're talking about is my early childhood.
Your early childhood, tumultuous, bouncing around, parents disconnected, living with grandparents disconnected, moving. That was a tough time for you in your formidable years. Has that been an effect on you throughout your life? Have you seen kind of the jet trails of that?
There was for a time because if you look at that, the first 6 years of public school, I'm in 7 different schools. Between moving in Texas and moving in California and all this. So I have no consistency at all of relationship. Also, same thing about who's raising me. This is my mom and dad, who I don't even remember that. And then it's my grandparents, and then that splits. And so now I'm with my grandfather and my uncle sometimes, and sometimes I'm with my grandmother. And then we moved to Texas. Then it's my grandmother, and then my uncle comes out. All this stuff, it's revolving door musical chairs of who is parenting me through this. And so, not that I saw all that pattern, but what it is, it meant that there was nobody that was always going to be there for me. That was kind of what I had in my head.
Sure, I'm with you.
It was not in the forefront of my mind. So it took me a while, I think, after having long-term friendships long term with family members to kind of get to a more healthy place on that. Because when you think it's all going to change, it's like that little girl Newt in Aliens. Gosh, I'm such a movie dude. Everything's about an analogy in a movie. But the little girl Newt, where she's like, it's all going to, here comes the bad guys again. And that's the way that she lives. She lives in always to be ready to
Absolutely
exit the door. And so I think that had a real effect on my relationships. And it took me quite a while to get past that. I think there's that. I think there's certainly things that still affect me today that are from childhood. I think some of them are positives. Some of them are negatives. But what I've tried to do is learn from those and then get to a healthier place on it. I think that I have. I don't think it's nearly as much as it was. I'm really grateful to live in an age when we have so many resources. There's great books, and there's also God has put amazing people in my life to model what is healthy behavior.
That's awesome. Well, man, I really appreciate you coming on the show. It's been good to get to know you. Got to know you more in the last hour and 20 minutes or whatever it is than the last decade that we've been together.
This is so funny. I feel like this. I've done a lot of interviews throughout my life. This is the most leaf in the wind interview I've ever given.
Awesome.
So
awesome.
Hopefully I gave you what you needed.
It's totally good. This is like doing years and years of police interviews and interrogations.
Yeah.
I'll go to the interviews, not so much the interrogations. It's literally open-ended questions, let them answer, hear what they're saying, find a point you circle back on, exploit it, start over. And that's what this interview has been.
I thought about that coming over here, and I thought, well, you haven't really. No. He has been doing some interview stuff. It'll be different context.
It'll be different. Yeah, if you were a criminal, you'd be confessing by now. So we'd be drinking together and having a good time. Anyway, so thank you so much for coming on. I'm totally blessed to have been playing with you for the last 10 years. Blessed to have you a part of the band, and it's our band, and to have you on the show. Your Hollywood makeup, your Hollywood music. You've been there, you've done that, and just thanks for sharing your story with me and all the listeners.
Always, man. Thanks
Cheers,
for being
brother.
My good friend.
Cheers. You guys, thank you so much. Check us out next week. We are going to have another great show lined up for you. And again, guys, check out that at Murders to Music. Thank you so much for listening. Like I said, every week we're getting... it sounds stupid, right? But for me, it's big. Tens and tens of more listeners and downloads. And we're all over the world. There's people listening from, Asia and Mexico and all these places that don't know anything about me, but yet they're finding something in this show. So just thank you guys so much. Keep the downloads coming. Keep the follows coming. Thank you guys. Check out Instagram at Murders to Music. My name is Aaron. Streamline Events and Entertainment's my company. If you're in the Portland, Oregon area, you want some live music, DJ, sound and lighting production, great. If you want to hear, get a hold of me. If you want to hear Mr. Michael Key, absolutely tear up the guitar. Doubledownduo.com. Thank you guys so much. Cheers. Peace. We'll see you next time.